I've been thinking a lot lately about memory, my past, my present, and how all those experiences roll around in your head together. The way I picture it, your mind is constantly at war. Good memories, like winning an award or a beach cocktail. Those things battle the insidious roar of the bad ones, like the time I lost my best friend Nikki. My point is, it's not always your choice what you think about. You might want to imagine puppies or something, but the monsters of your mind don't care. They creep in anyway to make your chest ache and your eyes water. Anyway, last week I went to see my mom in Annapolis. That's why I started thinking about all this. I haven't spoken too much about my mom. It's hard, because our relationship wasn't always simple. But when I visit her, I love that we can just sit. We don't do anything but enjoy one another's company. You can't sit in silence with just anyone. It takes a special relationship, worn and tested by years of memories together, good and bad. See what I did there? So we were in the kitchen, and when my mom caught me looking at her, she stuck her tongue out, went all cross-eyed. It was a face she used to make when I was a kid. It made me die laughing back then. It did last week too, because some things never change. My mom's sense of humor hasn't, but that laugh died in my throat seconds later, because in my head, a war had started, out of nowhere. A horrific, life-changing memory clawed its way into my mind, beating back the good. Soon, it was all I could think about. It's all I'm still thinking about. I'll tell you about it, because I have a moral obligation to. See, this is a cautionary tale about the deadly power of memory and what happens when it disappears altogether. You're listening to Run, Fool! I'm Rodney Barnes, and this is episode 51, The River Lethe. This happened well over a decade ago, at another moment in time, when I was at my mom's house in Annapolis. It was July, and I had just gotten there off a red-eye from LA. I didn't usually visit outside of the holidays. Being there in summer felt odd. Everything was so bright. There was a reason I was there. See, I'd been in Los Angeles for about a year by that point. I knew Mom missed me. She called a lot. I could have been better about taking those calls, but she was always down. It was one thing after another. A close buddy of hers had died. All her friends in the neighborhood moved. She had new aches and pains. Basically, she was lonely and getting old. I was trying to start my life and career. I'm not saying I was right. It was selfish, but I didn't feel like I had time for her. Then yesterday I got a call that bothered me. Mom seemed different, really, really happy. Which sounds weird to say. Who wouldn't want to see their mom happy? I can't explain it. It was just off. I called my grandma to go check on her, ease my worries. But Grandma was on one of her Atlantic City trips with her girlfriends. So, there I was, in Annapolis, in the middle of summer, looking into things and hoping my bad feeling was a whole lot of nothing. I walked up the steps to my mom's door, squinting against that East Coast sun. I could hear the soothing sounds of Motown coming from inside. They got louder when my mom flung the door open. She looked amazing. Wearing one of her old dresses, some flowery number I hadn't seen in years. She wore dresses like that when I was a kid, back when she dropped me off at Grandma's and spent the summer nights at Carr's Beach, the hottest place in town, where the best bands played. I mean the best. The Temptations, Four Tops, James Brown. It was Mom's heyday. It was everyone's heyday. Mom ushered me inside and told me to take a seat in the living room. I watched her whip around, getting me a snack, tidying up. She was talking non-stop about her friends. some new clothes she'd gotten. She cracked jokes as she moved, too, giving me a hard time about how much I was growing. It was nice, you know? This was the mom I remembered. From when I was small, it was like she was in her 30s again. Beautiful, a respected teacher, newly divorced. Yeah, back then she had a whole life of possibility ahead. She finally said, took my hand, smiled. I smiled back. But when I really looked at her, a cold dread washed over me. Her eyes were wrong. They looked full, no, glassy, like there was a thin layer of yellowish rippling water over her dark brown irises, sort of like cataracts, but wet. She wasn't tearing up or anything. It was more like there was a shimmer in her gaze. It didn't look human, not monstrous, but not human. And it was enough to start a nervous flutter in my chest. That flutter turned into an ache when she spoke. She said the other day at work one of her students came in without shoes again. My mom used to be a teacher, taught at this little school in the woods where a lot of the kids came from families that didn't have much. I was always so proud of her work. She was an advocate, a leader, but she hadn't taught for years. I tried to keep my voice steady. I asked her what year she thought it was. She frowned, like the question had stumped her. Then she mulled it over. As she did, her watery, yellowing eyes swam. Her mouth twisted into a worried knot. She started talking at a quick, panicked clip about going to Carr's Beach and her favorite students. She even mentioned dropping me off at Grandma's tomorrow so she could run errands. All the while, her hand shook and her vapid, wet gaze peered at me. I went cold. My mom thought it was 1970 or something. Her mind was as cloudy as those strange, unsettling eyes of hers. Was it memory loss? Eye medication gone wrong? Maybe both, but maybe neither. I had this goading, insistent feeling, tickling the back of my mind. It was the same one that brought me there in the first place. It told me something wasn't right in this house. I needed a minute, so I stood, carried the remnants of our snack to the kitchen, then headed to the basement. The sheets were down there and I wanted to get my bed made. I thought the activity would help me sort through whatever was happening. But when I tried the basement door, it was locked, with a shiny, heavy-duty padlock on it. Huh? Why did Mom put in a new lock? I called out to her, asking where the key was. After a pause, she yelled back that she didn't know. She lost it. I added that to the list of things making me uneasy. I was worried about Mom, in a profound way. There was something about all this that felt off, like a big shift was happening, and our lives would be different on the other side. That night, I lay in my childhood room, staring at the ceiling, worried about what to do and how to feel. Eventually, I drifted off. Then, a blood-curdling scream ripped me from my uneasy sleep. For a gift that's always on time and lasts a lifetime, you can't do better than Masterclass. With Masterclass, your loved ones can learn from the best to become their best. Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 of the world's best. That's why Wirecutter calls it an invaluable gift. Gift unlimited learning. Learn from any Masterclass instructor, anywhere, on a smartphone, computer, smart TV, or even in audio mode. Learning is the most important aspect of human evolution. As I go through life, I never want to stop learning. And Masterclass has been an incredible aid in achieving that goal. Masterclass always has great offers during the holidays, sometimes up to as much as 50% off. Head over to masterclass.com/fool for the current offer. That's up to 50% off at masterclass.com/fool. masterclass.com/fool. My body reacted instantly. Before I knew it, I was running down the hall and into the kitchen, where a series of skin-crawling, eardrum-busting wails were coming from. The fluorescent light glare from above, a huge change from the deep darkness of the rest of the house, made me flinch. I saw stars for a second. When my eyes adjusted, I saw her. My mom knelt in the middle of the kitchen, mouth open in horror. A confused moan erupted from her throat. She gaped at her surroundings like the kitchen was going to attack her. She was scared. Let me tell you, there's nothing more terrifying than seeing your parents scared. It's disorienting. I found myself just standing there, frozen, watching her pain, until I snapped out of it and rushed to her side. It took about 15 minutes for her to calm down, but when she did, she asked whose kitchen she was in. Hers had blue tiles, a cabinet with a crack, a farmhouse sink. She remodeled her kitchen a year ago. She was describing how it looked before, when I was growing up. Then, she peered up at me. Her eyes were almost completely replaced by a thick veil of water, gold-tinged and rippling. I could still see her irises, but they were faint, like ghosts lurking under a rancid, yellowing pane of glass. Whatever was wrong with my mom, it was getting worse. She wasn't just living in the past. Now she was forgetting the present, and those eyes haunted me. A brutal reminder that things weren't just bad, they were dire. Then I saw the basement door, the one that was locked earlier. It was wide open. My mom caught me looking and grabbed my arm. Her soggy gaze locked into mine. Her lips pressed together so hard they went white. She looked otherworldly, like she'd been body snatched. Then she hissed, "Do not go down there." If there's one way to make sure I do something, it's to tell me not to do it. After she said that, all I wanted to do was go down into that basement. But I knew it would upset her, so I closed the door, made her some tea, and set her up in the living room. I needed her to calm down while I figured out what to do. We sat together, staring out the window at the dark street outside. Dawn was just starting to break. After a minute, Mom asked if I was going to go play with Nicky today. You all know Nicky. He was my childhood best friend. Nicky died a few years ago. Even so, thinking about him made me smile. That's the thing. Even though I was worried, the memory of those days playing basketball in the street with Nicky made me happy. All of a sudden, Mom clutched the arm of the couch and gasped. She said she couldn't remember the name of the street we played on. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were swimming, both with real tears and that unnatural liquid that seemed to be eating her up. She said, "Where's the good stuff going? That's the stuff I want." After that, I did what I should have done earlier, what I always did when I didn't know what to do. I called Grandma. I don't know why it took me this long. Maybe because I thought I could fix things myself. I was an adult now, after all. But, adult or not, I was scared. I went into my bedroom to make the call. Grandma picked up on the first ring. Said she'd gotten home from Atlantic City late last night. She had a feeling I'd called, so she took an earlier bus. I didn't need to say a thing. She told me she'd be right over. I hung up. I already felt better. Grandma would fix it. She always did. But when I went back into the living room, my mom was gone. I slowly turned. I could see into the kitchen from where I stood. The basement door was wide open again, exposing an inky black interior. I rushed over. There was no light on and the switch was somewhere at the base of the stairs. Terrible design. So when I started down the steps, I had to feel around in the dark. When I got to the bottom, I reached for the switch, but something distracted me. There was water running somewhere. Maybe a leak, but no, it was more full-bodied. My mom's basement was half finished, a small room with some plaster walls and a concrete floor. There was a corridor on opposite ends that led to the boiler room. In that corridor, I could see a light coming from it, some amber soft hue that flickered like a lantern. I headed towards it, down the narrow corridor, till I was at the door to the boiler room. Light leaped from around its edges. I pushed it open and stepped into an entirely different world. See, I knew I was in my mom's boiler room, but that's not what it looked like. I'd walked down the stairs through a corridor and entered another dimension. I was in a towering cavernous tunnel with flickering torches jammed into its stone walls. Cutting through that cavern, right in front of me, was a pale yellow river. It flowed down the endless lengths of the tunnel until it disappeared around a turn, going on for who knows how long. I would have questioned my sanity. That'd be the logical thing to do when you find a mysterious water-filled cave under your mom's house. But I got distracted. A few yards from where I stood, kneeling at the side of the river, was my mother. She was crouched over the water, hands cupped as she brought the liquid to her mouth, and took a deep, gulping drink. When she finished, she looked over at me. Her eyes were dense with shimmering liquid. They swam in a current like they were part of the river she stood beside. The puddle of water under her lids was so thick it looked almost amber, and I couldn't see her irises anymore. She stared at me with those unnatural peepers, then asked, "Who are you?" Some of you might know how it feels when a parent doesn't recognize you. For those who don't, it's like you've been plucked out of your life and placed in an alternate reality where everything in the world is the same, but you. You don't exist because someone you know better than anyone in the world thinks you're a stranger. Of course, I told her who I was, but she shook her head. Then she said she was still thirsty. She bent down to take another drink, and let me just say I didn't want her to do that, because I understood that the river was the cause of all this. So I hurried to stop her, but when I tried to pull her away, she shoved me. I lost my balance and fell. My arms flailed, but I knew it was useless. I had no control. It was only a matter of time before I plunged into the sinister body of water that was eating my mom's mind. At this time of year, maybe you're looking back on all the amazing memories you have from 2024, especially if you're in love. Maybe you're already looking ahead to your plans in 2025, and maybe, just maybe, those plans involve getting engaged to the one you're in love with. For anyone about to take that momentous step, I recommend sourcing their engagement ring from BlueNile.com. Blue Nile is the original online jeweler since 1999. On BlueNile.com, you can create a bigger, more brilliant piece than you can imagine at a price you won't find anywhere else. Blue Nile offers a diamond price guarantee, which means that in most cases, they can meet or beat a competitor's price on a comparable diamond, and you can feel great about your purchase. Right now, go to BlueNile.com and use code RUN for $50 off your purchase of $500 or more. That's $50 off with code RUN at BlueNile.com. BlueNile.com. A hand grabbed my wrist. It wasn't that strong of a grip, but it was enough for my waving arms to have an effect. A balance shift. Half a second later, I staggered forward, still on dry land. My heart kept racing as I looked up into the kind, worried eyes of my grandmother. Grandma didn't waste any time. Her gaze slid to the river with fear, respect, and recognition. Of course, Grandma knew what this was. She knew what everything was. Said she didn't know how it got here, but this was the River Lethe. Grandma looked old then, I noticed. She was unbearably weary. When she spoke, her voice sounded old too, ancient, like it belonged to a dream weaver from the bowels of folklore. Maybe that's because the river, well, that's where it came from. She told me it was the river of forgetfulness. That's sort of what Lethe means in Greek. Oblivion. It's a myth. The dead drink from it when they enter the realm between life and afterlife, so they forget who they were when they lived. It helps them transition, because you can't hang on to the past when you're facing down eternity. It's supposed to be in the underworld, the Greek god Hades realm, but Grandma always thought Lethe was more nimble than that. She'd heard stories of the river appearing to those among the living who call to it, who want to forget. I looked at my mom. Her vacant, watery eyes still stared at the river. She'd been so unhappy whenever I spoke to her about her friends moving away. so-and-so dying, her loneliness. Even before all this, she'd been wanting to forget the now. But when I mentioned that to Grandma, she shook her head. Drinking from Lethe takes away the bad stuff, sure. That goes first. The good stuff is harder to get rid of. It's stickier. So at first, Lethe washes away the things you want gone. But then, she didn't need to finish. I knew what she meant. The river gets it all. I stared into the water. It was pretty clear so I could see the bottom. It was filled with stones and moss and all that. Like a regular river. Except there were strange thread-like tendrils flowing in the current. They were golden, too, and they seemed like they were part of the river. But every now and then they would expand into faces. A momentary glimpse of the river Lethe's many souls. Their mouths all hung open. Their eyes stared blankly up at me. Seconds later, they twirl up to thin, floating tendrils once again. This happened over and over. I realized what they were. The dead who drank from the river, and now they were drifting in its current, to the afterlife, freed of who they once were. I didn't want my mom to become one of them, so I asked Grandma how we could fix it. She smiled at me. That was something the two of us shared. We weren't content to just let things be. If something sucked, we'd make it suck less. She told me she didn't know for sure, but legend says that there's also a river of memory. According to the people who know better, you can call upon that river. You just need the password. She gestured to Lethe and said, that password, it's supposed to be somewhere at the bottom. Look, I'll be honest about what happened next. It was dumb, but I was a whole lot younger back then, which made me reckless and reactive. So the moment she said those words, I dove into the river. It was like an ice bath. The chill was so violent. I felt delirious, but I kept my lips pressed together. I wasn't going to let it drop inside. See, I couldn't let Lethe dilute my senses. I needed them, especially my mind. I opened my eyes, taking in the amber-hued, watery world around me for just a second, before I dove for the bottom. As I did, a tendril drifted in front of me, one of the thread-like souls I saw from above. When it passed my eye line, it swelled into a head. An uncanny, vapid space expanded in front of my eyes, glaring at me. Its empty, hard stare cut me deep. I was looking at something I'd never seen before. It was the absence of a person. It made my whole body recoil, because I didn't know what this thing was and if it would attack me. Seconds later, it twisted up into its thread again and slithered out of sight. I didn't stop to dwell. I kept swimming, down, until my hands sank into the grainy mush of the riverbed. And that was it. Nothing happened. I floated there, but no password appeared. Okay, so I'll admit I'd been hasty. See, there was a lot of river bottom, and I had no way of knowing which part had the password. I'd been in a rush, okay? Part of me thought I'd figure it out when I got there. I was so busy beating myself up, I almost didn't see them. The soul tendrils. The water was suddenly thick with them. They surrounded me and merged with one another, weaving together like a tapestry. They all expanded into faces, thousands of faces, suspended in the water, rippling with unnerving serenity. The water gave their skin a sepia tinge, making them look as old as time itself. Their blank, unwavering expressions stared me down as their gaping lips moved, like they were trying to say something. Then I heard it, a muffled whisper. I couldn't quite understand it, though. Then there was another. Soon they were all whispering, a low, frenetic frequency that made my skin crawl. Finally, a word clarified. Escape. Then all of them started screaming that word. Escape! 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 I didn't know if that was the password, or if they were warning me away from some ungodly fate, but either way I was running out of time. My vision started to ripple, just like the water. My head spun and my chest burned. I needed air. I took off for the surface. I could hear the muffled voices behind me turn to wails. Something was wrong. I looked over my shoulder. They were coming for me. Hundreds of open-mouthed, enraged faces shot through the water. Their tendril bodies flew out behind them, like streamers. I swam as hard as I could, which to be honest wasn't that hard. I was exhausted, running out of air. My arms were barely making progress and my legs felt like dead weight. But I could see the flicker of lanterns above me. I was so close. My vision went black, just as I reached up. My hand shot out of the water. I gasped as oxygen poured into my lungs. I felt Grandma's hands on mine, pulling me out, just as the souls of the river pulled me in. Their slick tendrils wrapped around my waist, my legs. They grabbed at my shoulders. I felt Grandma let go of me, and I started to slide back into Lethe. Then I heard a loud thunk. Another one. Grandma stood above me, with her massive purse. It was always filled with all kinds of stuff: Reader's Digest, duct tape, rolls of quarters, a bottle of gin, you name it. So it was heavy, which made a great weapon. That massive bag came down again and again, pounding the spirits of Lethe like a game of whack-a-mole. Finally, enough of them dropped away that I could scramble up. I crawled out and collapsed. Grandma stood over me, anxious, asked me who I was, who she was. I waved her off. I didn't drink a drop, I said. Then I heard a soft voice. Rodney? I shot up. My mom sat on a rock, watching me. Her eyes were still watery, but less so. Seemed like she was having a moment of clarity. Her timing couldn't have been better. I rushed over, frantically saying the only piece of information I had. Escape. I begged her to say it, and to mean it too. I didn't know if it would work, but it was our only chance to find the river of memory. My mom hesitated. Then she asked what would happen if she drank from that other river. Grandma took her hand, told her she'd remember everything. My mom's eyes filled with tears. She said she was sorry, but she didn't want to. See, her life, well, it got into gray. She put a hand on my cheek and said she hoped I'd understand. To her, feeling nothing was better than feeling everything. I shook my head. No way. I told her the password again, then I spewed out anything I could think of. Memories, the good stuff. All the time she took me to the movies and plays, taught me about art and creativity, about how she'd do that cross-eyed face when she stuck her tongue out at me, and how much I loved it. I reminded her about our tough years and how we got through those. Now when something good happens, she's the first person I want to call. I kept going, talking, even after my mom's eyes filled with that pale yellow water again, and her mouth hung open in a vacant smile. I kept going until my grandma put a hand on my arm. She asked me who I was saying all that for, my mom or me. I closed my eyes against the tears that poured out. I understood what Grandma meant, even if I hated it. See, I wanted my mom. She wanted to forget. One of us wasn't going to get our way, and it seemed like it was going to be me. I'd been so eager to pull her out of the current when my mom just wanted to drift away. Mom's memory got worse after that. Fewer moments of clarity until she slipped away altogether. I'm not sure if she kept drinking from the river, but something tells me it had already done its worst by the time I got there. Which brings me back to last week, when I was visiting my mom, and we sat in silence. We do that a lot, because that way I could pretend things were fine. She looked the same, smiled the same. All her mannerisms were familiar. When she spoke, that illusion slipped away. See, after she stuck her tongue out at me, we both laughed, and she said, I knew a little boy who used to like that. It hurts every time. The worst thing is, I can't tell her that. She doesn't have clarity anymore. It'd be useless. It means I don't get to tell her the good things either. I can't say thank you for bringing me into this world, for loving me, and teaching me about culture, literature, and humor. That's the battle, right? My point all along. The bad always comes with the good. They're a package deal. You can't get one without the other. For me, that's okay. Because I try to live my life with so much joy, it triumphs over pain every time. Run Fool is a production of Ballen Studios, Campside Media, and At Will Media. It is hosted and executive produced by me, Rodney Barnes. This episode was written by Kate Murdoch and produced by Abakar Adan and Lane Rose. Editing by Abakar Adan. Sound director, designer, and mixer is Kevin Seaman. Coordinating producer is Avery Siegel. And artwork by Jessica Clarkston-Kiner. Special thanks to Sequoia Thomas. Production support by Jeremy Bone and Cole Lacasio. Special thanks to our operations team, Doug Slavin, Ashley Warren, Sabina Mara, and Destiny Dingle. Executive producers at Ballen Studios are MrBallen, Nick Witters, and Zach Levitt. Executive producer at Will Media is Will Malnati. Executive producers at Campside Media are Matt Scher, Josh Dean, Vanessa Gregoriadis, and Adam Hoff. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.